This is one of the interesting visual illusions that are at play with our brain. So when you look at these two tables, the question would be, are they the same size? And your immediate reaction would be that one is a different size from the other. And that's quite interesting, because when it comes to it, if you try to sort of take the one size and move it, you will discover that these tables are the exactly same size. And this says a lot about the way that we perceive the world, that there are some built-in systems that predetermine how we experience things. Our immediate reaction is these two tables are not the same. That's what our brain will tell us. So there's a system there that quickly tells us what's up and down with this example. Now then afterwards, when you've heard me say this or you've seen this proof, your conscious brain can go, oh, hang on. When I see this type of picture, I know that they are actually not the same size. And this is interesting because this easily illustrates two important processes in our brain that we have already seen on the slide today, and we will also hear about, I'm sure, later. Obviously made famous by Dan Kahneman in this book, where he sort of presents these two systems. I always thought these names of the systems were really poor. I don't think he was a marketing genius. But of course, system one is the first system, the early system, the reptile brain. That's how you can remember which system is which. Other people use other systems. Some people talk about the monkey and the suit. But those are different competing systems, or not even competing, sort of like systems that are working together. The fast system we can learn things, and we can have quick decisions. So a lot of the decision making that goes on in our brain is based on how we use those two systems. And what's very interesting, of course, is that the first system, the system one, the reptile brain, prepares decisions for us to a large extent. And of course, it can't be discussed to how large an extent, but it means that if we have to take split decisions, which we do all the time, because we perceive so much, we hear much, we see much, we feel much, then we need to have some systems that can sort of decide for us. But this also influences our decision making. And you all know this because you read these books about everything from social proof and all these different sort of like psychological terms that try to describe how we are like priming, anchoring, all these effects that are actually basically part of our decision making process, which is based on how we use some systems in our brain to make fast decisions. And of course, this is wildly important when we talk about A/B split testing, because what's so interesting about split testing is that we can tap into those systems because we can measure what people actually did. That said, of course, I know there are a lot of problems and trickery in split testing, but just as a concept, that is the main thing, which also, of course, challenges stuff we've heard today about user testing, because testing and speaking, even speaking, it's a very cognitive process, and it has been long proven that when you speak, when you think aloud, when you do user testing, you use a part of the brain that is not in system one, which means that you affect your decision making. But that's just a fact, but that's just something we have to live with when we do this type of research. But in split testing, we can see what people immediately do, and we can ask them to relate to things that they cannot verbalize. So no one will sit in a user test and say, I don't like the red button. I much prefer if that was green. That doesn't happen, at least not in my experience, and I've done quite a lot of user testing. So there are things you cannot ask. And of course, then you want to tap into this system. So that's what's going to happen. So that's why we are looking at that's one reason why split testing is so super fun and important. That said, so let's do some split testing, because we all know that is sort of like a built-in part of conversion rate optimization, or evidence-based growth. I heard you. So split testing, interesting. Let's just take a quick example. So stuff like this. Okay, so this is an example from the website we're going to look at now. It's called Guess the Test. And before that, it was called Which Test Won? And the fun thing about that website, no matter what you think about how the testing is done, is that you can see lots of split tests, and you can look at the results, and you can see what people voted, and you can see the analysis and all sorts of things. You can be inspired for your own split testing. Now, in Guess the Test, you will have things like this. So in this example, for instance, you have to give them a one-time gift, and you've heard these cases from other sort of like when you donate money, whether you want to give like 5, 10. If you have suggestions, and even some companies say like if you give $10, it's like giving someone 2 chickens, and if you do $20, like giving whole school books. You know those examples. Yeah. So this is this thing where you can get people to donate more if you give them set amounts. So here's the test. So there's a version with the dollar sign. So it says like $25, and there's one just with a number. Now this sort of test can really impact how much people donate. All right. So that's the conversion, and it's important because the donations are important. So if you just ignore the change between these two versions, you're basically just like tipping out possible sort of revenue. But you cannot ask someone in a user test, where would you donate more if there's a dollar sign or not? No one will be able to go like, oh, I think I would this and that. That does not make sense. So this is the type of test that makes sense because it's worth money and you can't ask people. But in this case, what would you answer? So you could look at some theory and go like, okay, I read all my books, I read my Kahneman, and I know for a fact that if you talk about money and you go into that sort of thinking, then maybe blah 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 blah. Or you could have another story that goes, oh, I think if you don't mention the money, people won't be so focused on the loss, the loss aversion, so they will donate. But basically, you could have everybody in the room picking both solutions. So this is interesting. So in this case, this is not the test. We'll vote together in a minute. But in this case, for instance, there are 300 guesses from all sorts of people. And of course, this is not very sort of like valid data. The whole point here is just like a lot of them chose one version over the other. And a lot of these tests that you will see in Guess the Test, they are 50-50. And the interesting thing about when it's 50-50 is that when you see the test result afterwards, you would see that maybe it made an increase of like 50-70% click rate through or even revenue. So that's a lot of money involved in something where in the boardroom, half the group says A, half the group says B. And you've got to respect that trickery. I think that's also why I like that model.